action. Now I do see 5 brave people who are willing to sit close to me in the front. Therefore, they first get the gift. There are more gifts for everybody else if you can participate and work with me in today's seminar. So, I want to briefly review about a little bit more about me, my background, what I've done, and why I'm here to work with all of you. So I received my PhD at the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. Afterwards, I was curious to see the world. So I decided to move to Asia to be involved in biomedical research, first in Singapore, and then also in Japan. In this time, I published a number of international peer-reviewed articles. I was actively involved as a peer reviewer for a number of international journals. And now I'm currently working at Springer as editorial development manager. In my current role, I'm working with universities and journals to help improve publication output and quality. And that's really going to be the focus of today's seminar. How do you achieve publication success? It is getting more and more competitive, and you need to have the basic skills if you want to succeed in publishing your research in international journals. So today, I will first briefly introduce Springer, about who we are. I will then talk about some of the publication trends in Asia, specifically focusing on Taiwan Tech. How do you compare to other universities in Asia? Most of today's talk will be focused on communicating your research clearly to your readers in your manuscripts. And then lastly, I'll be talking about some of the resources, databases, and tools that Springer offers that can help you achieve your publication goals. So let's first begin with who we are. Let me see a show of hands. Who here has heard of Springer before today? Wow, very impressive. I'm glad to see so many people. So, for the first question of the afternoon, can anybody tell me who this gentleman is? First person to raise their hand. If you don't raise your hand, you don't get the gift. I've heard the correct answer several times already. Somebody who's brave to raise their hand. I'm going to now pick on people. People in the back get picked on first. You, sir. Who do you think this gentleman is? Springer. Excellent. This is Julius Springer. He was the founder of the company back in 1840. So we are a very old company with over 170 years experience in academic publishing. We're also a very large company. We have over 7,000 employees worldwide. We have 4 based here in Taipei. We want to be close to the researchers so we can provide the most benefit when they want to publish the works. We also publish a lot of research every year. We publish over 2,200 journals, over 8,400 books per year. So we do publish in a variety of different areas to give researchers the chance to share their ideas, their theories with the world. We also have a number of innovative products, such as our open access platform, different databases and resources, some of which I'll discuss at the end of today. And Springer Link is our platform where you can have access to all of the Springer content, to all of these journals and books. Over 220 million downloads occur per year. a lot of people accessing Springer content worldwide. And of course, we have published with many of the top researchers in the world. Over 200 Nobel laureates have published with Springer, including these gentlemen at the bottom, some of which you may recognize who they are. So we do have a long history, we have breadth of experience and reputation, but we also have breadth in terms of publishing disciplines. We don't just focus on one discipline. Instead, we try to cover all the major disciplines, from social sciences to engineering, computer science, to really ensure that researchers worldwide have a platform to share their work. And there's a recent development that happened in May of this year. This is the second gift coming up. There's two companies listed here, Springer and Macmillan Science and Education. Can somebody guess what happened in May of this year with these two companies? Raise your hand. You have to raise your hand. I don't hear it unless you raise your hand. Somebody, you already said the word. Whoever raises their hand will get the gift. How about you, sir? Merger! Exactly. Well done, sir. This is exactly what happened. Springer and Macmillan have merged, and we are now called Springer Nature. So we're a much larger company than we used to be. We have 5 major publishing imprints: Springer and Biomed Central on the Springer side, and then Macmillan, Palgrave, and Nature journals from the Nature side. So we are now a much larger company, offering a lot more experience and resources to researchers worldwide. So now that I've introduced a little bit about Springer and who we are, let me move on to the second topic of this afternoon, and that is publishing trends. The whole goal for Springer is to help researchers publish their research. We give them the resources to publish, as well as the resources to access that content. So it's then useful for a researcher to understand what the trends are like in your region. Now, I was quite impressed when I looked at the research output in Web of Science for Taiwan Tech. Especially in the last 10 years, there has been phenomenal growth. And that's great to see. That means that the university and the administrators, researchers, are dedicated to ensure you're continually improving your publication output. This helps build your reputation worldwide. But the number of publications does not reflect the impact of that research. I define impact as the influence those publications have on the field. How are they advancing the field? How are they contributing to the field? How do they let others worldwide improve their own research? And one way to measure impact, probably one of the simplest ways that's commonly done, is to look at the number of citations those papers receive. Now, I don't want to look at the total number of citations, because that will be influenced by how many papers are published. Instead, let me show you the number of citations per paper. This is from Web of Science, from 2000 to 2015. I have 3 Taiwanese institutions down here at the bottom, and some other top universities around Asia. Now, one thing I would like to emphasize is that Taiwan Tech we're actually a bit behind many of the other top universities in Asia. That means you have room for improvement. It's great that you're having increased research growth. You'll also need increased quality so that publications are having more impact. And this is important. University rankings, something that many people think of, is inevitably based on the publication of that university. Here's a common one, the Times Higher Education University ranking. This is their methodology to determine who's number one worldwide. The number of publications, only 6%. The citations, 30%. 5 times more weight. They understand it is the citations that the publications receive that is more important. That is what reflects impact. Reputation, which I would argue is also based on the publications of your university, that's how people are familiar with your university, makes up 18%. Together, this means about 50% of the ranking is simply based on publication quality. You improve the publication quality of your university, you improve the rankings. Another common one is the QS World University Rankings. 40% is based on the reputation your university has. 20% based on citations. They don't even consider the number of articles. That's not of interest to them. It's the impact those articles have. And I know this is important because I was looking at your website today, and there's a big banner on the front page of the website advertising the new ranking of Taiwan Tech in the QS World Rankings. Does anybody know what that number is? 216? 260. Although you didn't raise your hand, sir, because you spoke very clearly and I could identify who you were, and you knew this number. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Taiwan Tech is currently 260, up from 371 last year. If they want to further improve their rankings, they can do so by improving their reputation. And the way you improve your international reputation, your rankings at these databases, is to improve publication quality. This will also help attract top students, top researchers, altogether giving a better learning environment for everybody at the university. So publication quality can help your university. But some people will say, does it help me? What about me? I want to be, improved in my academic careers. Well, publication success will influence your personal academic success as well. There's a study that came out last year where they wanted to determine which factors would affect academic success. So they looked at 25,000 researchers in a life science database, and they measured academic success by looking at postdoc becoming an assistant professor or an assistant professor getting tenure. And they found 5 factors. First was the number of publications that researcher had, particularly early on in their career. But as I've been trying to stress, the number of your publications is not the only thing you should focus on. Because another important factor was the impact factor of those journals. The higher the impact factor that these researchers published in, that correlated positively with increasing their academic success. That means you need high quality research, high quality papers. Furthermore, even in those articles not published in high impact factor journals, if they're highly cited, suggesting they're having impact, that also positively influenced your career in academia. Now, 2 other factors were also correlated with academic success. One was the ranking of the university where your research was conducted. And lastly, I hate to say, was gender. So men generally found it easier, I see all the men smiling, But I'd like to emphasize to the women in the audience, this was only 1 out of 5. The other factors, particularly these 3, are ones you can do to help influence your academic success. So publication success is not only helping your university, it will help you in your careers as well. And that now brings us to the third topic for today's seminar, and that is, how do you achieve publication success? How do you ensure you're clearly communicating your ideas, your findings, to be published in better journals, to be more widely read? To do this, you need to be an effective communicator. And for me, effective communication means that your goal is not only to be published, but to be widely read, to influence your field, to have impact. And to do this, you need to learn to write effectively, to clearly communicate your ideas. You need to be able to choose the right journal to share these ideas with the right people. That is how you can have impact. And you need to logically organize your ideas. So when people read your articles, they can clearly understand its significance and its relevance for the field. So in this next session, I would like to talk about these 3 topics in more detail to give you the advantage you need to be more successful. So let's first talk about English. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about grammar and punctuation. Microsoft Word can help you with that, with the little green squiggly or red squiggly line. What I want to talk about is how to communicate more concisely and more effectively. Clear, academic writing. But some people will tell me, you know, Jeff, do I really need to publish in English? There are a lot of good Chinese journals or Indonesian journals I can publish in. I'm still reaching people. Isn't this enough? I would argue no. If you want to have impact in your field, you need to publish in English. This is going to be the international language for all of academics and government and business. This is how you have international impact, not just regional impact. In fact, I looked at the documents that were indexed in Web of Science from 2014. 97.6% were all English documents. So not only will you be reaching more people, you have more opportunities to publish. There are a lot more English journals than others. And you will be able to find a journal that is right for your topic, that is reaching the right audience to communicate your findings. And by doing this, you will help improve your international reputation. You will build international collaboration. You'll be invited in the future to attend and speak at international conferences. You'll have more impact. All of this can help influence your funding to ensure you can have more money to do more and better research. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, this will influence your careers. So if you want to succeed in academia today, you need to publish in English. Now, before I talk about some other aspects of writing in English, I wanted to give you 2 quick tips that you can use to improve your readability. How easy people can read your writing. First, use short sentences. It is much easier for people to read short sentences quickly than these very long sentences. And when people read academic papers, they want to read quickly. They're reading in the office, in the lab, between experiments, between meetings. So you need to ensure, as the author, you're making it as easy as possible for your readers to understand your ideas. I recommend 15 to 20 words is a good length of a sentence. You can have some shorter sentences and some longer sentences. It's always nice to have variation, makes your writing more interesting. But in general, most of the sentences should be between 15 to 20 words. And you can be sure you do this by only discussing one idea per sentence. So often when I'm editing non-native English-speaking papers, one of the most common problems I see are these really long sentences communicating 2 or 3 ideas with all these semicolons and commas. First thing I do is I will divide up that sentence into shorter sentences, each one communicating one idea. So this is one quick tip that you can use. Another is to use active voice. Writing an active voice is simply easier and more simple for people to understand. Let me show you an example. So this sentence is in passive voice. The models comparing the economic growth and diversification of Southeast Asia and Central Asia were evaluated. Now, because this is in passive voice, the verb, which is underlined, is at the end of the sentence. That means the reader has to wait until they finish the sentence to find out what the sentence is about. And particularly if it's a long sentence, they may forget what the subject was. What's being evaluated? The growth, the diversification, these 2 regions. So now they have to reread the sentence to better understand the idea. Furthermore, sentences that are in passive voice often do not include the subject. Who evaluated these models? Was it you? Are you discussing another research group? Now you're forcing the reader to look at the context of what their sentence is written, so they can identify the subject that's not included. You're making it more difficult for your readers to understand your ideas. So if we simply make this active voice, we evaluated the models. In the first 3 or 4 words, the reader now knows exactly what this sentence is about, making it more clear and easier to understand. Now, am I telling you to never use passive voice? No, of course. It's okay to use passive voice. But try to write more frequently and active. Maybe about 75% active, 25% passive. Helps give some variation. It can help avoid repetition. You don't want to say, we evaluated, we evaluated, we evaluated. It's boring. You can use passive voice to help make your writing more interesting. So on average, use more active voice. Now, another way you can improve readability is to understand sentence structure. Now, I'm going to give you an example to show you what I mean. I have another gift here. If someone can answer this, the first one to answer this correctly. I'm going to show you 2 sentences. I want you to tell me which one you feel suggests you're going to get a raise, an increase in your salary. Sentence 1, you deserve a raise, but the budget is tight. Sentence 2, the budget is tight, but you deserve a raise. Who thinks sentence 1? Raise your hand. Sentence 2, I think this lady in the purple shirt, maybe I was in you. I'll let you give this to somebody else, and you have one already. But you did raise your hand very quickly. but I would agree with most of you that it is the second sentence. But look at these two sentences. They have the exact same words. All I have done is change the order in which those words are presented. And that influences how readers interpret the meaning of that sentence. This is called the stress position. Readers will focus at the end of the sentence to determine what is important, just as many of you did to identify sentence 2. So you should use this as a writing technique then, to emphasize what is important about your idea by placing it at the end of the sentence. Now, the stress position will not only emphasize what's important, it can also help introduce the topic of the next sentence. When you're an author, if you want to be an effective author, you should think yourself as a guide. You're guiding your reader throughout your ideas. There needs to be a logical progression from one idea to the next, one sentence to the next. And the stress position can help you do that. So we already discussed how this was the stress position, emphasizing what was important. But it now introduces the topic of the next sentence. So you deserve a raise? Well, your salary will increase at the beginning of next year. Now, the information that's given at the beginning of a sentence is what's called the topic position. And its role is to introduce to the reader what this sentence is about. So if this oval represents a sentence that's trying to communicate one idea, the information provided at the beginning is the topic position. It will introduce this idea to the readers. But it should also link back to previous information, so they have context of what this new idea is about. So in this way, as you're writing your paragraphs, you can logically guide your readers from one idea to the next. Now, I have 4 sentences here. I won't go read through this in detail, but I just want to emphasize how you can use topic and stress positions to clearly communicate your ideas. In blue, I have the topic positions, each one that introduces what that sentence is about. In red, I have the stress positions, emphasizing what's important. So these researchers were doing titanium surface modification. Well, it improved its catalytic efficiency. Not only is this what's important about this modification, it now introduces the topic of the next sentence, that this increased efficiency, unfortunately, decreased over time. That's the stress position. That's what is important about this idea. But it now introduces the topic of the next sentence, that the lack of long-term effects, because of this decrease over time, was likely due to an aqueous environment. This is the stress position. This is what's important about this idea. And again, now introduces the topic of the last sentence, that evaluating additional solvents is currently being investigated. I like to use this also as an example. This last sentence is in passive voice. It's okay. When should you be using passive voice? Look at the context of where that sentence is. Consider the topic positions, stress positions, avoiding repetition. And in terms of topic position and stress position, is more logically makes sense to use passive voice here. So it is okay to use passive voice, maybe 20 or 25% of the time. Keep in mind the context in which that sentence is being written. In the end, you will have writing that is much easier for people to read and to understand. Now, this is not only important for constructing paragraphs out of sentences, It's also useful for linking paragraphs together as well. So I have two paragraphs here. And the first sentence of a paragraph is just like the topic position. It's the topic sentence. It lets the reader know what this paragraph is about. In this case, about OLEDs. They then have some supporting sentences to develop this idea more clearly for the reader. And the last sentence is the conclusion. It is the stress sentence. It emphasizes why is this idea important for the reader. And they say, because strong and growing interest has consequently been shown in solution-based processes to address these limitations. So what's important is the solution-based processes. That is what the authors think is important for the reader to remember. But it now will also introduce the topic of the next paragraph. That realizing solution processed multi-layer OLEDs, linking back directly to the stress sentence of the previous paragraph. So you're basically providing clues, kind of breadcrumbs, so the reader can clearly follow and read and navigate your logic without having to read it 2 or 3 times. Use the topic and stress position to construct your sentences and your paragraphs, and you will considerably improve the readability of your writing. Now, I have a very common quote I hear from many non-native English-speaking authors. I should use complex words to make my writing sound more impressive. Who thinks this is a good idea? Raise your hand. Bad idea? Ah. Good choice, sir. This time I'm specifically looking at this side of the room. There you go. Yes. You should be avoiding complex words. Many non-native English-speaking authors think they need to impress their journal editors, their reviewers, their peers in US and UK and Australia. But you need to use simple language. You're not being judged by the words you use. You're being judged by your ideas, your theories, your logic. If people cannot understand your ideas, it doesn't matter what words you use. You will not impress them. You impress them with your ideas, not your words. And the problem is your ideas are going to be complicated already. If it was very clear and obvious, we wouldn't need to do research. We do research because these ideas are complex. And if you try to explain a complex theory or idea using complex words, I guarantee you most people will not understand what you're trying to say. You need to explain complex ideas simply. And it's not just me. Albert Einstein long ago said, the definition of genius is taking the complex and making it simple. So this is a common idea that people have had in academics and in science for a long time. So do not try to impress people with complex words. Impress them with your ideas. Let me give you an example. To ascertain the efficaciousness of the program, we interrogated the participants upon completion. There's nothing wrong with the sentence. No spelling mistakes, no grammatical errors, it's an active voice, it's not too long. But I can assure you many people around the world would have no idea what I'm trying to say because I've tried to use these complicated words to sound impressive. You can communicate the same idea more simply by simply saying, to determine the success of the program, we question the participants upon completion. More simple, more direct, more concise, and people can clearly understand the ideas you want to communicate. That is what makes you an effective communicator. So please avoid using the thesaurus to find complicated words. So now that we talked a bit about how to improve readability, I want to now discuss about choosing the right journal. So let me ask all of you a question first. Who here thinks you should write your manuscript first and then choose a journal? Raise your hand. Nobody? Okay, one or two people. Who thinks you should choose the journal and then write the manuscript? This gentleman in the black shirt looks like from Thailand. Looked like he raised his hand first. That is exactly what you should be doing. Choose your journal first and then write your manuscript, which is why I'm talking about choosing journals before organizing your papers. And there are a number of reasons why you should be doing this. First of all, you need to be familiar with author guidelines. Different journals use different article formats. You need to know the format that your journal uses to write your paper. It can be related to the structure of the manuscript. Do they have separate results discussion sections or combined results discussion sections? That will influence how you write your paper. Do they have any word limits, reference limits, figure limits? You need to be aware of these. You don't want to write your paper, choose a journal, and then find out that your paper is 1,000 words too long. Now you either have to try to revise your manuscript, and removing 1,000 words is not easy. Or you'll have to choose another journal that was not your first choice. Both cases, you're wasting your time. You can avoid that by choosing the journal first. And also be familiar with the reference style. Different journals use different reference styles. Now I strongly encourage you, just out of curiosity, who here uses reference managers, EndNote, Mendeley, Zotero, RefWorks, Papers? Only a few of you. I would strongly encourage you, no gifts for that one, I apologize. I strongly encourage you to use reference management software. There's a number of them you can use. They can help formatting your references to be much, much easier. But this is really just one reason why I recommend to choose your journals first. You also need to be familiar with the aims and scope. So journal editors receive many manuscript submissions every day. They have lots of choices. One of the key questions they ask themselves is, why is this manuscript more suitable for my journal than this manuscript? So you need to ensure that you communicate the suitability of your paper. And you can do that by being familiar with the journal's aims and scope. In the journal's aims and scope, the journal editor will discuss which topics they're interested in, which readers they're trying to target. And I would strongly encourage you to emphasize those topics and those readers in your manuscript, in your cover letters. Especially in your manuscript, in the first paragraph of your introduction and the last paragraph in your conclusion. This will help emphasize the suitability of your paper for that journal, increasing the chances that the journal editor will not rapidly reject it based on suitability. Another reason you should choose your journal first is many journal editors will look at your reference list. They want to see, have you cited any papers from their journal? Now they do this again to help to quickly identify suitability. If they see that you've cited 2 or 3 recently published articles in their journal, that suggests your research is building on research they have already published. And therefore, your paper is likely to be suitable for their journal as well. So I recommend identify your target journal, choose 2 or 3 recently published articles from that journal, include them in your manuscript. Lastly, journal editors will have preferences for writing style. I gave you some general guides you can use. But I strongly encourage you, look at recently published articles from that journal. See if you can see any clues. Do they prefer first-person active voice or third-person active voice? So do they prefer you to say, we evaluated this, or they want you to say third person, which this study evaluated? This can help you then modify your own writing style to suit the preferences of the journal editor. This, again, can help improve suitability. This is also true with passive voice and terminology that is more commonly used in that journal, etc. You don't want to have to worry about these after you write. You're wasting time. So there are a number of reasons why it's useful for you to choose your journal first. Now, there's a lot of factors you do need to consider when choosing a journal, however. Most of them will be clearly displayed on the journal's website. This is a typical Springer journal. Most journals from other publishers will also have this information as well. So you want to be familiar with the aims and scope and the readers. Is this journal publishing topics similar to yours? So you want to look at the aims and scope. They'll talk about what this journal is particularly focusing on. They mention this journal fosters interdisciplinary dissemination from physics, chemistry, biology, and healthcare. If these make up some of the readers you're trying to target, then this is a good journal. If your research is more focused on material science, not biology and healthcare, then this is probably not the best choice for your paper. So read the aims and scope carefully. Ensure it is suitable for your topic. But you want to ensure that these readers can find your published article. So you need to check where that journal is indexed. What online databases can researchers use? And this information should be clearly shown. And look through the different databases and ensure, yes, these are ones these readers would use to find my paper. Helps improve your article's visibility, discoverability online. Another important question for many authors is speed. How quickly will your paper get published? So many journals will now post information about the metrics of that journal. So the number of days from submission to first decision, number of days from acceptance to online publication, for example, information about usage, information about different types of impact factors. This information is becoming more important for many authors, so many journals, including all of those in the Springer, now make those easily available on the journal's website. Now you also, as I mentioned earlier, need to be familiar with the author guidelines. So those should be easily found. How do you submit your paper, information for the authors, particular training that they may offer free of charge. I'll be talking about the Author Academy as one of the resources Springer offers a little bit later today. Now, some of you may be interested in publishing open access. There are pure open access journals, but Springer is one of the largest in the world. But most journals will also have open access options. So even if it is a subscription-based journal, you can still publish your work open access. For those of you who are not familiar with the term open access, this is a publishing model which basically says the readers do not need to pay to download and read that article. It is freely accessible. Now, because it's free for the reader, unfortunately, the author needs to pay for the charges. So you'll have to pay, but then it is going to be freely available worldwide. So this may be an option you may want to consider. And of course, impact factor, a little number a lot of people are obsessed with. has to help you to kind of evaluate the prestige of the journal. So impact factor is basically related to the number of citations that articles within this journal receive. Be aware citation patterns vary between different fields, so you can't compare an impact factor from humanities with an impact factor in material science. They're very different. You can compare within the same discipline, but there are a number of additional ones that I had mentioned up here, in addition to impact factor, that can help you evaluate the prestige of that particular journal. So these are all different factors you may want to consider. And you may have to, for case by case. For some manuscripts, open access may be useful because some of the readers may be people in private companies. And people in private companies do not have access to all the subscription journals. But other papers may be more relevant for people in academia, where they'll have access to those journals. Different papers will have different needs. You'll need to assess all of these different factors for each of your manuscripts. But there's a problem. There are a lot of journals out there. Any ideas how many journals do you think are published across different fields? Who thinks there's more than 1,000? Raise your hand. More than 5,000? 10,000? 20,000? You're the first one to raise your hand at 20, which is as high as I'm going to go. There are currently over 28,000 journals in different disciplines. These are peer-reviewed journals in different disciplines from different publishers. I mentioned from Springer, we have over 3,000 journals currently in our database, of which 2,300 are in English. The others are in other languages, particularly in German, because we are originally a German company. If you're just interested in open access journals, there are currently over 10,000 journals listed in the Directory for Open Access, which is the list of all the open access journals. And if you're interested in SCI journals, those in science that have impact factors, there are over 8,600. That is too many to choose from. Am I recommending you have to look through hundreds of journal websites to try to determine which one is right for you? You don't have time. You need an easier way to find the right journal. Now, there are some free online tools you can use. Springer has one called the Springer Journal Selector. Completely free, nothing to download. And will allow you from the portfolio of Springer of over 2,300 English journals, find which one is suitable for your current paper. You simply input a research summary about your study, and then when you click on Find Your Target Journal, the Springer Journal Selector will match the keywords of this input text with all the published abstracts from all of our journals in our portfolio, and determine which ones more frequently use the same keywords. From that, we'll give you a list of recommended journals, and you can also filter this list by impact factor, publishing frequency, or whether or not they have open access. The most highly recommended journals are at the top, lower recommended at the bottom. They'll display the impact factors, publication frequency, and the open access models as well. So based on this information, maybe you think Space Science Reviews is a good journal. So when you click on this link, you get a pop-up window that will quickly give you all the information you need without even going to that journal's website, including the aims and scope, the impact factor, the publication frequency. But they'll also tell you which articles from this journal were similar to yours. Why is this important to you? Why would you care? For two reasons. First of all, you need to ensure they're publishing these papers recently. look at the dates of when these are published. If they're all from 10 and 15 years ago, that suggests this journal editor is probably not currently interested in your topic. But if they are been published in the last few years, it suggests that it will be interesting in your topic. Keep in mind, these aims and scope are generally kept very broad, so they don't have to be continually revised. So this is a good clue for looking at the current interest of the journal editor. Now there's a second reason that this is useful as well. You may remember I told you that journal editors will look at your reference list. Have you cited any papers from their journal? Here's a very easy place to find those. These are obviously articles similar to yours. I would recommend just pick 2 or 3 of the more recently published ones and include them in your paper. Help improve the suitability of your manuscript for the journal. So a lot of useful information without having to go from every journal website. These are all just pop-up windows. And then if you do decide based on your evaluation that this is the right journal, if you click on this link, it takes you to the journal's website, where, as I showed you earlier, you will now have access to the author guidelines, and you will now know how to prepare your manuscript. So with that information, we can now move on to the third topic of this session: how to logically organize your ideas in your papers. Now, when people read your paper, they're going to have 4 key questions that they want answered. Interestingly, I have 4 gifts here. Can anybody suggest what types of questions do you think readers are interested in? Yes, sir. What's one potential topic or one potential question?
What is the result?
What is the result? Great answer. That's one of the questions. They want to know what you found. Anything else? Yes, sir.
The procedure.
How did you do your research? The procedures, the methodologies. Great question. Great question. Great answer, but in the form of a question. Yes, ma'am. Back here. Excellent. Why did you do this research? Why is it important? One more. Yes, sir. The key words. Okay. Maybe. We'll think about that. So anything else? Yes, ma'am. What is the problem? That's similar to why the study needs to be done. It's how you relate it. Give you a hint. It's something that most authors will address later on in the manuscript. Yes, ma'am.
What's the implication for the future study?
Fantastic. What are the implications? So you see, as readers, you already know what information you expect to find in a manuscript, in a paper. So as the author, it is your goal to answer those key questions. Why did your study need to be done? What did you do? What did you find? And how will this study advance the field? What are its implications? And because of that, manuscripts are structured in a way to answer these 4 key questions, with introduction, methodology, results, and discussion conclusion. That is why manuscripts for hundreds of years have been organized in this fashion. It's because these are the questions readers want answered. So when you are writing your manuscript, you are clearly answering the question your readers have. So the first one is why the study needs to be done. That should be answered in your introduction. Now, I like to think of the introduction as starting like an inverted triangle. So it starts off very broad, and then it will narrowly guide your readers down to your specific aims. So that means in the beginning, Your readers need context, background information. Why is this topic important? Why is this topic interesting? This will be dependent on the type of journal you choose. So if you really feel that your topic will be of worldwide importance, so you choose an international journal, you may want to emphasize the worldwide relevance. So if you do have especially what appears to be a regional topic, you need to emphasize in the beginning of your introduction why this topic is interesting worldwide. Otherwise, journal editors will think it is not suitable for their international readership, and they'll simply reject your paper. Also keep in mind, are you going to submit to a very broad or interdisciplinary journal or a very specialized journal? If it's a very specialized journal, most people will be familiar with your topic. They don't want a lot of background information. But if it is a broad journal, where people outside of your immediate field may be interested in your study, they need more context. They need to understand why this is important, why this is interesting. You should include 2 or 3 review articles that these people can then have access to learn more about this topic if necessary. So that means if you submit your paper to a very broad journal, because it has a high impact factor, but it is a very specialized topic, there's a good chance the journal editor will rapidly reject your paper, and you'll look at your decision letter, they'll say, although your findings are very interesting, they are too specialized for our broad readership. We recommend you choose a more specialized journal for this paper. So you find a specialized journal, you reformat and resubmit. No, that's not what you should do. You need to rewrite your manuscript to be suitable for the next journal. If you're now going from a broad journal to a specialized, you'll likely need to remove some of that unnecessary background information. It's a very common mistake authors make. When they resubmit to a different journal, they do not rewrite it to be more suitable for that second journal. And that will lead to problems during the evaluation. So once you have clearly explained to your readers why this topic is important and interesting, you now need to tell them what is known about this topic. Talk about recently published papers. Make sure they're up to date. And also, if you're going to submit to an international journal, cite broadly from research groups worldwide. That will show the journal editors and peer reviewers you are familiar with the research being done on your topic worldwide. Now, once you've explained what is currently known about this topic, now you can discuss what is not known. What is the key problem? What are you trying to address? This will help then logically lead in to your specific aims. And it is very important that your aims directly address this problem. So let me give you an example of how some authors have clearly linked their aims to the identified problem in a field. So in this paper, the authors first state the general problem. They use this keyword, however. Now, as an author, remember, your readers want to quickly read your paper. They'll often skim the paper, looking for important keywords that lets them know this is where they're going to find the information they're looking for. You should be familiar with these keywords. One keyword is however. That's a signal to the reader you are now talking about a problem in the field. So use this to be a more effective communicator. So however, conventional thin film materials limit the use of such thin film transistors in flexible backplane circuitry because of their fragility and relative low mobility. In this problem, they highlight two key aspects, the fragility and low mobility. Readers will now expect that both of these will be addressed in this paper. Now, for most of you, you're not going to be the first one to address the question. Other people already have. We need to discuss those studies. How did they address this particular problem? So they go on to say that these two-dimensional layered semiconducting halogens have attracted attention because they have a high carrier mobility, directly addressing this problem, and mechanical flexibility, directly addressing this problem. And they also have a finite band gap. They talked about the current solution to the problem that addresses both aspects. However, keyword, letting the reader know this problem is not yet solved. Improvements for these transistors have been hampered by the presence of a Schottky barrier. This is the current problem. This is the problem that the authors need to address in their specific aims. And that's precisely what they do. The key problem is the presence of the Schottky barrier. So when they look at the aims of this paper, they say, in this research, we investigated these transistors that have a high Schottky barrier under high temperatures as they lead to a larger thermionic transmission. So they are offering a solution to the current problem. This is what your readers expect you to do. They want to know why this study needs to be done. By logically guiding the readers through this process, they can now read this aim and they understand why this study needs to be done. These authors have successfully answered the first question. Next question. What did you do? So this is your methods, your experimental. Some authors tell me, Jeff, but not many people really read this section, right? I don't need to spend much time on it. There are quite a few people who will read this section carefully. Importantly, they're going to be peer reviewers. When I used to review papers after reading the aims, first thing I read carefully was the methods section. This is how I evaluate the researcher's study design. Are they addressing this question in the appropriate way, with the appropriate methodology? If they are not, it invalidates all of the results. I stop reading. I recommend reject. Say they're not using the most up-to-date or the appropriate methodology. So when you write this section, ensure all the information that readers need to evaluate your study design is included. That includes who and what was used in your study, so any samples, participants, if you worked with any animals or humans, what materials you used, and where were those materials obtained from. How did you conduct the experiments, the general methodologies, specific techniques. If you use controls, make sure you discuss those clearly. And how did you analyze all the data that you obtained? So what were your quantification methods? What are your models and equations? If you used any, what were the variables and assumptions of those models? And if you used statistical tests, which analyses did you use? And are they appropriate for the distribution of your data set? This gives the readers all the information they need to evaluate your study design. Your study was done right. That means they can now move on to your results. What did you find? This is the main reason you want to write the paper, is to communicate these results with others in your field. However, remember, you've been working with these results for many months, maybe even more than a year. For you, they're all very clear in your mind. But I assure you, somebody who reads your paper for the first time can get easily confused if you do not present your results logically. Logically organize your findings. For many fields, that first includes some sort of initial observation, followed by the characterization of this observation, and then lastly, why is this observation useful? How is it applicable? Let me give you an example. So let's say you fabricated a new membrane that can be used for water treatment. That is your initial observation. Those are the findings you share first, how you fabricated the membrane. But now your readers want more information about this membrane. They want you to characterize it. So you now share your findings related to the physical or chemical properties under different conditions, temperatures, pressures, so they can better understand the membrane that you've made. But then they'll wonder, okay, so you have this membrane, you characterized it, but why do I care? Why is it useful? You need to share findings that demonstrate efficacy, applicability. In this case, its ability to remove particulate contamination from wastewater. In this way, readers clearly have been guided through your research and understand the significance and the relevance of your work. Now, I also recommend when you write this section, write it section by section, write it in subsections, where each one corresponds to a single figure. Makes it much easier for your readers to follow. Furthermore, when most people download your paper, they don't read it from beginning to end. The first thing most people look at is the figures. Look at Table 1, Figure 1, the first graph. This provides the information they're looking for quickly. And then if they want more information, maybe about Figure 3, they can easily go to the third subsection. By doing this, you are an effective communicator, ensuring the information that your readers need can be found quickly and efficiently. Now, if you do have separate results discussion sections, make sure you are not discussing interpretations. That belongs for the discussion section. However, particularly in physical sciences, you may have to write a combined results discussion section. And when you write these sections, you have to still use the same logical format. You'll still organize your findings based on this logical presentation of what was the initial observation, your characterization, and the application. But when you discuss each figure, you'll first describe the results and then immediately follow it with the interpretation of those results. A good writing technique for this section to help differentiate this is verb tense. Generally, when you're talking about empirical results, you use past tense. We found it. But when you discuss the implications of those results, those are current implications, you use present tense. This suggests. By using these two tenses, makes it very clear for the reader from when you're describing the results from when you're describing the interpretation. Now, when you describe this interpretation, this should now logically lead into why you conducted the experiments in the next figure. So first we found this suggested X. Therefore, because of this, we now did these analyses to address this issue. Leads them logically to the next figure, and so on and so forth. So again, it's a nice logical progression through your ideas. Now, if you do have separate results discussion sections, you want to organize the discussion a little bit more carefully, a little bit differently, because this is where the readers expect you to answer the one key question: why is this study useful? How is it advancing the field? What are the implications? Now, I like to see these discussion sections as the opposite of the introduction. So the introduction, you start off broad. then narrowly guide your readers down to the specific aims. So what shape would you imagine the discussion section would look like? Any ideas? So if the introduction starts off broad and then goes narrow, what would be the discussion be like? Yes, sir.
From narrow to wide.
Narrow to wide. He is accumulating the prizes. These are great gifts, everybody. You should be very excited to get these. Feel free to share one.
Thank you.
That's exactly correct. Think of the discussion section as the opposite of the introduction. You want to start off narrow, summarizing your key findings, and then guiding your readers back out to the general implications for the field. Now, as you do this, you'll spend a lot of the discussion section discussing the relevance of your work. How is it similar or different with what people have already found? If it's different, why do you think it's different? This is a chance for you to be able to give your own ideas and theories, give suggestions, potential leads on new lines of investigation. You'll need to discuss any unexpected or negative results. A very common mistake that many younger authors make is they think negative results are bad results. Therefore, I won't include it. That's wrong. Bad results are those obtained with a bad methodology. If you're using the proper methodology to address the question, a negative result is still a good result. And your readers have the right to be able to evaluate all the results from your study, not only the positive ones. That will not allow them to critically evaluate your work. Discuss your negative results. We tried to do this, but it didn't work. We think it didn't work for these reasons. But, future research may want to further investigate other ways to address this problem. I recommend when you have anything negative, regardless if it's differences or negative results, always give recommendations on how other people can build on this. You're turning something negative to something that's positive for the field, advancing the field. Similarly, limitations. All research has limitations. Your readers expect you to be able to identify them for them. What did you do to try to avoid them? Now, some authors think, well, I have these limitations, I just won't mention them. Problem is, peer reviewers are experts in your field. They will be familiar with the limitations of your study design. And if you don't discuss those limitations, the reviewer's opinion of you, or in confidence in your abilities as a credible researcher, will decrease. That could negatively influence how they evaluate your paper. Don't make reviewers tell you what your limitations were. State your limitations, what you tried to do to account for those limitations, and again, how could future research build on this? Lastly, at the end of your paper, you'll have your conclusion. If you have a separate discussion section, this will generally be the last paragraph. If you have a combined results discussion section, it will usually be a separate section. We will overall summarize the key findings, but importantly, emphasize implications. The conclusion is like the stress position. It is the last thing people will read. Because of that, it's what you should want them to remember most. What is most important about your work that you want them to remember? Because this will likely be the one thing they remember clearly 1 or 2 months later. Then the specific findings they won't remember. It's the last paragraph. So you need to communicate clearly. Use keywords to really help emphasize certain topics. And as you're organizing this section, you should start off by the major conclusion of your paper. In this paper, In conclusion, in summary, let the readers know this is the main conclusion of your work. In addition to the conclusion, tell them the one or two most important findings. Here they say, the quantum efficiency increased. The maximum emission wavelength significantly shifted. This is what the authors want their readers to remember most. They'll have a lot of other results. These are the most important ones that support their conclusion. But as was mentioned earlier, your readers want to know, why is this useful? What are the implications? So they say, our results provide new insights. They can serve as guidelines. This is how others can build on this work. This is why it is useful. But do not assume that if somebody reads your paper one time, maybe spending 1 hour, they will immediately know what the next steps are. You do. You've been working on this for months, maybe even more than a year. You've been thinking about the next steps. Somebody who spends an hour reading your paper will not have those same insights. To be an effective communicator, you need to ensure the information your readers are looking for are easily provided. In this case, further studies should extend our surfactant-free oxidative polymerization to substituted polyethylene nanoparticles. They're telling people in their field what the next steps are. Yes, you will create some competition. You're also going to create new collaborations. More people are going to cite your paper. More people are going to invite you to conferences to present this work if it's clear how it's relevant for the field. You want to build your international reputation, improve the number of citations, let your readers know what the next steps are. In this way, this is a relatively concise paragraph. They have communicated these key ideas to the readers. You should do the same. So in the end, you'll have a logically structured manuscript like this that clearly explains to the reader why the study needs to be done, what you did, what you found, and how the study advances the field. Now, in addition to this linear progression of ideas, I recommend you link the ideas together. We talked about linking ideas earlier with topic and stress positions. Linking ideas is always a great way to help give your readers context. Why is this idea important? So we talked about how the objectives should be linked to the problem. All of your results should be related to your hypothesis. And your implications, the conclusion, should directly be addressing the problem. Think of your paper as a story. If you give your readers a problem at the beginning of your story, they expect the answer by the time they finish. That answer should be your conclusion. That will help emphasize how the study is contributing positively to the field. So writing a manuscript is a lot of work. In fact, talking about it makes me feel a little bit hungry. It's 6 o'clock now. Anybody else feeling hungry? Raise your hand. Okay. Well, I saw a couple of restaurants that I was thinking of going to later for dinner. But I can't decide which one to go. So I thought, since I have this nice, interactive, friendly group of people, you can help me decide. Now, I feel like Mexican food tonight. I like Mexican food. And I saw this restaurant that looked interesting. And I saw this restaurant here. So which of these two restaurants do you think has higher quality food? Who thinks the restaurant on the left? Raise your hand. Usually a couple people. I'll give you a just for being brave. How many people think the one on the right? I don't have that many views. But I would agree most people would think the restaurant on the right has higher quality food. How do we know that? We've never been to these restaurants. We've never tried their food. Yet we are already judging the quality of their product based on our first impression. First impressions are important, not only for choosing restaurants, also for choosing which articles people want to read. People don't have a lot of time to read everything published in the field. They'll be selective. And they will decide which articles to download and read based on the abstract. Your abstract is where you can give the best first impression. So make sure you do it well. It's the first time your readers can evaluate the relevance of your aims, the significance of your results, and the implications of your conclusions. But it's also the first time they can evaluate the clarity of your writing. If you cannot communicate these aspects clearly in your abstract, they will assume, based on their first impression, you cannot do so in your article either. And nobody has time to read a poorly written paper. They will not download it. So you have to write clearly and concisely to communicate these key ideas. So what do you need to communicate? Well, the same 4 questions need to be answered. Why your study needs to be done. What are your aims and your methods to address the current problem in the field? What were your key findings? And lastly, what are the main conclusions and the implications of the field? The problem is, unlike a manuscript, most abstracts look like this. They're unstructured. They don't have subheadings. They're not divided into sections. There are structured abstracts, very common in clinical research, and many other disciplines. Abstracts look like this. But that doesn't mean that that same information is not being clearly communicated. You should be able to take any clearly written, unstructured abstract and identify the background information, including the key problem. However, let people know this is the problem. Let them know what you did. We now report. In this study, we show. This lets your readers know that you're transitioning from previous research to the current paper. There's no section titles to tell them when you do that. Use keywords to do that. They should be able to identify your key results. We found. It's a good way to help let your readers know you're now going to describe from what you did to what you found. And lastly, your main conclusions. In conclusion, in summary, these authors wrote, our findings provide valuable insight. It lets the readers know that they have now no longer describing results, which are past tense. They're now describing the implications in present tense. Use keywords. Use verb tense properly. Because of this, I recommend write your abstract section by section. In which case, you can then simply put all the sections together. You now have an abstract that clearly communicates why the study needs to be done, what you did, what you found, and how the study contributes to the field. The 4 key questions your reader wants answered. However, this type of structure works well when you have longer abstracts, greater than 150 words. Many journals will have abstracts between 150 to 250. If so, I recommend to use this structure. But some authors tell me, particularly in physical sciences, they must have much shorter abstracts. Maybe the limit is 150 or 125. I would recommend remove the background information. These journals tend to be more specialized, so the readers will be more familiar with the topic. So the background information won't be as important. So if you do need to remove a section, I recommend remove the background. But there are some journals, particularly in physics and chemistry, that even have shorter abstracts, a limit of 60 words or 100 words, in which case, remove the conclusion. The core information you need to communicate is what you did and what you found. Let me show you an example. This is from a physics journal that has a word limit of 100. This abstract is 94 words, and they mostly just describe, in this study, we investigated what they did, and then they go and describe their key findings. In their manuscript, in the article, they'll discuss the implications, future direction, but they do not want to sacrifice discussing the results to do that. So people ask me then, what are some good rules you could use to know when you need to modify your abstract structure? First of all, check the author guidelines. If they tell you to include a conclusion, you better include a conclusion. Otherwise, the journal editor or reviewers may ask to just send it back to you, telling you to rewrite it. Also look at previously published articles. Maybe there's a word limit is 150. You want to know what the journal editor prefers. Look at recently published articles. How are most of those abstracts structured? Do they include background information? If so, you should include it as well. If they do not, then the journal editor is not so interested in that. Maybe you can discuss more about your results. Lastly, please be aware of technical problems. Let's try again. No, battery's good. So I'm going to talk from back here. Oh, I see. All right. Now, there we go. See, I told you I'm getting hungry. Here's what happens. Consider the audience. If you are submitting to a broad focus journal where people outside of your immediate field will be reading your abstract, you want to convince them to download and read your article. They need to understand the context of why the study was done and what the implications, particularly the broader implications for their field. So, for interdisciplinary audiences, I strongly encourage you to try to include background and conclusions as well. So, there's a lot of information you need to consider to write your abstract. But in doing so, you will be sure you give the best first impression of your paper to your readers, increasing the number of people who download your paper, read your paper, increasing your impact in the field. So in this section, I tried to describe what it means to be an effective communicator. And if you follow these rules, you will not only be more widely read, you'll be more widely cited, and have a better reputation worldwide. So make sure you write effectively. Make sure you choose the right journal to reach the proper people who will be interested in your results. And make sure you logically organize your ideas throughout your paper. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, this will be a shorter section, but we do have a lot of tools and resources. People think Springer is just journals and books. It's not the only thing that Springer offers. We try to provide a lot of resources to help you achieve your publication goals. And we see achieving your success comes in 3 key steps. First, you need to be familiar with the recent literature so you can identify an important and relevant research problem. You also need to conduct your research effectively and efficiently. And you also need to communicate that research clearly in your manuscript. So we offer a variety of different resources to try to address each of these different needs. And I just want to briefly describe what each of these resources are so you're familiar with how you can use them to maximize your impact. What does this number represent? Any idea? Raise your hand. Yes, ma'am. Number of the journals. If we published that many journals, I would be very impressed. But close, close. Yes, sir. Number of publications. Well done. So a number of journals, not that many. So these are the number of documents that are in SpringerLink. So this is the platform we use to share all of our articles, books, reference works. We currently have over 9 million in this. We have a lot of resource available for you to stay in touch with the up-to-date research in your field. So SpringerLink, which can be found at link.springer.com, is a very easy-to-use web interface. You can access journals, books, series, protocols, reference works, all of the publications that we offer. You can browse by disciplines, so that's going to be most useful. And if you log in with your institutional ID, so through Library Network, you can see the recent activity. What are researchers at your institution, at Taiwan Tech, currently reading and downloading? We help you to kind of stay in touch with some recent trends in your institution. Now, if you click on journals, you can then browse the journal catalog. You can see we have over 3,000 journals to choose from. You can filter by discipline, subdiscipline, language. We have about 2,800 English journals currently indexed. And it'll tell you which ones are open access. So even if your library does not have a subscription to that journal, you can still download and read any of those articles. Now, if you want to do a keyword search, you can do that as well. It will tell you all the results. You can filter by articles, chapters, discipline. And for the results, will tell you exactly what type of document it is. In this case, it's an entire book. In this case, it's a chapter. This is a protocol. So you know exactly what you're looking for. So SpringerLink is an easy way to stay up to date with the current literature. Make sure you're identifying the right question for your work. Another useful database, which is free to use, is AuthorMapper. AuthorMapper, I think, is actually really useful and provides you as an author a lot of great information. So if you do your keyword search, you'll get the total number of articles. In this case, looking for polycrystalline silicon. There's over 7,500 articles, 21,000 authors, 6,000 institutions, and 1,800 journals. But it will also tell you where these are being published. Are these just regional in Asia, or is this international? Gives you idea. Should you be choosing maybe an international journal or a regional journal, helping you get more ideas about the topic and its relevance worldwide. It is sponsored by, it's hosted by Google, so of course you can zoom in, like on Taiwan, and you can see there's people here in Taipei, people in southern Taiwan, Xiamen. You can look over in Japan or in Korea, help you identify maybe regional collaborations with other people in your area that are working on the same topic. Other information will be telling you what countries are publishing about this topic, which institutions, which authors. Great way to identify collaborations, who you may want to work with on this topic. It will tell you the year it was published. The peak, as you can see, is very close to 2015 here. This lets you know this topic is currently trending. If the peak was over here and now decreasing, that suggests a lot of journal editors probably won't be interested in this topic, and many readers may not be particularly interested. You may want to rethink your research strategy. What is currently trending? How can you make this topic more appealing to readers in your field? And lastly, they tell you which journals are more frequently publishing this topic. Again, a great way to quickly identify. In addition to that Springer Journal Selector, here's another way you can identify which journals are publishing this topic of your research. A lot of useful information, Author Mapper is completely free to use, so even from home you'll have access to this database. Now I want to talk briefly about Springer Materials. This is a database that will give you over 3,000 physical and chemical characteristics of over 250,000 materials. It's a very extensive database, allow you to search by keywords, by element, or even by structure. So if you're working with materials and you need to find useful information about those materials you're using to do your research more effectively, this is a great resource for you to use. Now I mentioned briefly about the Author Academy when I talked about the journal's website, about the author training. So Author Academy is a free online tutorial that Springer has on their website. Completely free. They have these interactive courses on writing clear English, manuscript structure, submission and peer review, and even writing books and chapters, which is an important part of Springer's portfolio. So these are relatively short, but they're useful for researchers and younger authors to be familiar with some of the basic concepts related to academic publishing. But we realized that because these are quite short, we wanted to really offer additional resources for universities to be able to capitalize on, to use, to maximize the impact of the researchers. And these are these advanced training seminars. Different than this one, this would be considered an Author Academy seminar. The advanced expert training workshops are meant to really provide more in-depth training. So they'll have interactive workshops on publishing, writing manuscripts, giving effective academic presentations in English at an international conference. We also provide editorial services, helping existing journals improve the visibility and the quality of their journals. And we can help institutions, universities, develop new journals that can really help benefit their specializations, their unique fields that they're really experts on in the field. So how are they different from like the one from today? First of all, they're very long. Usually at least one day. They're generally 2 or 3 days long. They're really meant to be an intensive workshop. They'll have a lot more detailed content, a lot more examples. We have a lot of writing activities, so you can't just sit back and listen. You have to be actively involved. A lot of discussions. We have breakout sessions where people can discuss the content. We tend to restrict the size to no more than 60 to make sure the trainer, which is me, can actually interact individually with everybody. We also include one-on-one consultations. We can meet with you for an hour to discuss your unique challenges that you're trying to face when publishing your work. And we can also include post-seminar assignments. You can submit to us your paper after the workshop. We'll review it and tell you how you can further improve it before you submit. So they're quite different from these kind of Author Academy workshops that you're attending today. We have a variety of different modules that are focused for authors, for reviewers, for journal editors. So if you are interested in how you can actually use these and work with these, please feel free to contact me. And this is what I'm actually developing in Springer, so I can give you the best information about this content. So in this way, we're really trying to provide the resources you need to achieve your publication success, giving you the resources to achieve each of these steps. And that way, in addition to be able to clearly communicate your research, achieve your publication goals, improve your reputation, help promote your academic career, and improve the reputation and ranking of your university. And so with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention today, and I'll be very happy to take any questions that you might have. Anybody that asks questions will get 2 of these if you ask a question. Okay, yes ma'am. You run back there.
Yes, Ryan.
Great question. Her question is, will writing a cover letter help improve your publication acceptance? Answer is yes. Journal editors are very busy. They're evaluating a lot of manuscripts every day. They do not have time to read every manuscript. So they'll often make their first evaluation of the suitability of your manuscript based on the cover letter. And so I strongly encourage you, write a cover letter, discuss the significance, the relevance of your work, the suitability of your work for that specific journal, and there's some information related to publication ethics. I didn't have time to talk about cover letters today. However, if you do go to the Author Academy website, on the submission and peer review module, there is some information about writing effective cover letters. Excellent question. I didn't have time to talk about that, so I appreciate you asking. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. You come over here. Oh.
When I'm writing, I have a question that sometimes I will need to cite the same reference in the introduction section and then in the review section. And I know the introduction is to describe your motivation for this study and the possible contribution, your purpose. And for this literature, you have to review a lot of study that have been done in this domain. But sometimes I have
short introduction, and it's a more in-depth review of what has been done in the field. Now, her question specifically is about citing the same paper in those two different sections. So let me tell you which types of papers you should cite in both sections, because there may be some overlap. In the introduction, you want to cite the really key studies. The introduction is meant to be much shorter, to really emphasize the motivation. Only discuss 2 or 3 key recently published studies that help identify why the study currently needs to be done. In the literature review, you're talking about the development of ideas about your topic. So you'll not just talk about recently published studies, but you'll go back further. So what are some of the seminal works? How did this lead to future studies? How did that lead to more recent studies? So you're really talking about a development of ideas and which people did that development. So there will be some overlap. Key part is in the introduction, keep it very brief. Key studies published more recently. In the literature review section, it's more of a, not a history of the topic, but a development of the topic. What are the limitations, the motivations of all those studies? How did that lead to more future studies? And there will certainly be some overlap, because at the end of the literature review, it needs to be clear what are the specific aims of your work. So it's a great question. I didn't have time to talk about literature reviews, so I appreciate you being able to bring that up so I can discuss how to write that section more clearly. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
I am an editor and a reviewer. I have a question. Many publishers will require the author to further register the manuscript. It's legal because I have more than 50 readers. I have more than 50 readers, but many publishers, like for instance, many American journals never require the author manuscript is limited to 50. That means that they
50 authors?
50 readers. That means they want you to distribute your manuscript below 50 because they want to profit. Publisher. Copyright is transferred to publisher.
Right.
And in the agreement of the copyright transfer agreement, they will say, okay, you can only share.
I understand. Okay. I understand. Okay. I understand. So her question is, after you publish a paper, you transfer the copyright to the publisher, and then many publishers will have a restriction on how many people you can freely distribute your published paper to after publication. And in her case, she's saying, for example, Taylor and Francis may say you can only distribute it to 50.
Many
right. And that's actually an important point from the publishing's point of view. is they actually want to ensure, if it is a subscription-based journal, that is going to be limited in terms of its distribution. Otherwise, of course, the publisher is going to lose money. It's not a sustainable business. So many publishers will have restrictions. Springer does not have that type of restriction. The one common restriction publishers have is you cannot post it on your webpage so people can download freely. That if anybody asks you individually, you can give them a reprint of that PDF one by one. But you cannot make it freely available. Now, some publishers will also have restrictions. You can only distribute to 50. But keep in mind, there is what they call an embargo period. Means after 12 months, you'll have now be able to distribute as frequently as you want. So they do that from a sustainability issue. It is a business. They have to sustain their business. Different publishers have different agreements. But I think she highlighted a very important problem here. You need to be familiar with the boat that you're getting into. What are the restrictions you will have if you publish with a particular journal? That information will be included in the author guidelines, so you may want to review that carefully so you're not going to break any copyright issues with the publisher. And I think that's an important point to make, is that you do enter an agreement with the publisher when you let them publish your work, and you have to honor that agreement. So always read the author guidelines first to ensure you're willing to accept those terms. Great question. Yes, ma'am.
Is it better to use we found or I found? I'm usually a single author.
Another great question. I talked about the usefulness of using active voice. And first person active is very commonly used and many journal editors prefer. Meaning you'd say, we found this. Her question is, what if you're a single author? Should you say, I found? This is where it's really going to be a journal preference. Many journal editors do not like the singular first person, that I found. The plural first person, we found, is quite accepted. Singular first person is really a journal editor preference. This is where you may want to use more third person active. This study showed, this study found, this paper demonstrates. It helps to avoid the problem of saying I throughout the paper. Look at recently published articles. Look at the preference of that journal editor, but many journal editors in this case would prefer third person active. Great question.
Okay, I think you must be tired, right? After 2 hours. I think I don't have to say.